What happens when Keanu Reeves appears on Steve Harvey's show and reveals the secret charity work he's been doing for children around the world? A simple interview transforms into a powerful testimony that leaves the entire audience in tears. And before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love connecting with our global family. The studio lights blazed with their familiar warmth as the production team made final adjustments. Technicians checked microphones, camera operators confirmed angles, and makeup artists delivered last-minute touches to the set. Behind the scenes, the energy was electric. Keanu Reeves, one of Hollywood's most beloved actors, would be today's featured guest on The Steve Harvey Show. In his dressing room, Steve Harvey adjusted his perfectly tailored suit, the rich blue fabric complemented by a crisp white shirt and patterned tie. At 65, Steve carried himself with the confidence of a man who had overcome tremendous obstacles to build his empire. From homelessness to Hollywood, his journey resonated with millions. The gold crucifix that hung around his neck caught the light as he leaned toward the mirror, a gift from his mother that he never removed, a constant reminder of faith that had carried him through his darkest moments. A producer knocked lightly on the door. 5 minutes, Mr. Harvey. Steve nodded, took a deep breath, and whispered his customary prayer of gratitude. Another day, another opportunity to bring joy to others, another chance to use his platform for something greater than himself. Across the hall, Keanu Reeves sat quietly in his own dressing room, declining the offer of additional makeup. At 59, his face carried the distinguished lines of a life lived with intensity and purpose. Unlike many Hollywood stars, Keanu had developed a reputation for genuine humility and kindness that set him apart in an industry often dominated by ego. The production assistant had explained that today's interview would focus on Keanu's recent film projects, his motorcycle company, and perhaps touch on his philanthropic work. Though Keanu typically avoided discussing the millions he had donated to children's hospitals and cancer research over the years, what no one knew, not even the meticulous producers who had researched every aspect of both men's careers, was that today's conversation would veer dramatically from the planned topics into something far more profound. As the familiar theme music filled the studio, Steve Harvey strode onto the stage with his trademark energy, greeting the audience with wide gestures and a brilliant smile that concealed the early morning exhaustion he'd been fighting. Today, Steve announced after his opening monologue, we have someone special, a man who's been called the internet's boyfriend but who's so much more than that. He's an actor whose films have inspired generations, a philanthropist who gives without seeking recognition, and by all accounts, one of the genuinely good souls in Hollywood. Please welcome Keanu Reeves. The audience erupted as Keanu walked on stage, dressed simply in black jeans and a dark blazer over a plain t-shirt. His hair fell just past his shoulders, and his beard was neatly trimmed. He waved briefly to the audience, visibly uncomfortable with the overwhelming adoration, before embracing Steve with genuine warmth. Thank you for having me, Keanu said as they settled into the plush interview chairs, his voice characteristically soft, yet resonant. Man, it's my pleasure, Steve replied, leaning forward with genuine interest. You know, before we get into your new film, I got to say something. In an industry where we hear so many stories about bad behavior, your name always comes up differently. People say Keanu gave away millions to the special effects team on The Matrix, or Keanu bought a homeless man food. What makes you different? Keanu shifted slightly, uncomfortable with praise, yet thoughtful about the question. I don't think I am different, he responded after a moment. We're all just trying to navigate life, you know. I've been fortunate, and when you've experienced both loss and good fortune, you realize how quickly things can change for anyone. Steve nodded, recognizing the genuine humility. That's exactly what people connect with. You've never lost touch with reality despite all your success. The conversation flowed naturally into Keanu's recent projects, his passion for motorcycles, and his thoughts on his unexpected cultural icon status. The audience laughed at his self-deprecating humor and leaned forward during his more philosophical reflections. It was precisely the engaging, entertaining segment the producers had envisioned. Then, during what should have been a transition to the next talking point, something shifted. Steve noticed a pendant hanging from Keanu's neck, partially concealed beneath his shirt. "That's a nice piece you're wearing there," Steve said, gesturing slightly. "I don't think I've seen you wear jewelry before." Keanu's hand instinctively moved to the simple leather cord around his neck, pulling out a small handmade clay pendant painted in bright colors. He looked at it with such tenderness that the studio seemed to quiet, as if the audience collectively sensed a shift in the atmosphere. "This," Keanu said softly, holding the pendant with obvious care. "This was made by a boy named Miguel. He lives in a small village outside of Guatemala City." Steve, an experienced interviewer who recognized genuine moments when they appeared, set aside his prepared questions. "Tell us about Miguel." Keanu took a deep breath, his eyes briefly glancing off stage as if checking whether he should continue down this unexpected path. Then he looked directly at Steve. "Can I tell you something I've never shared publicly before?" The question hung in the air. In the control room, producers exchanged glances. This wasn't in the script, but they knew better than to interrupt authentic television when it was unfolding. "Of course," Steve answered, leaning forward slightly. Keanu nodded, gathering his thoughts. "For the past 15 years, I've been running a private foundation that works with children in some of the poorest regions around the world. No press, no publicity, just direct support where it's needed most." The audience was completely silent now, collectively holding their breath. "Miguel," Keanu continued, still holding the pendant, "was 7 years old when I met him 3 years ago. His village had been devastated by landslides after heavy rains. His family lost everything: their home, their small farm, his father." Steve listened intently, all showmanship set aside, replaced by genuine presence. When our foundation team arrived to help rebuild the community, Miguel was living with his mother and 3 younger sisters in a makeshift shelter of scrap metal and tarps. But Steve, what struck me wasn't what this child lacked. It was what he still had. Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and carefully removed a photo, which he handed to Steve. The camera zoomed in as Steve looked at the image, a small boy with bright eyes and a determined expression, standing proudly next to a tiny garden plot growing amidst devastation. Miguel had somehow salvaged seeds from his father's farm. While adults were dealing with the immediate crisis, this 7-year-old boy was already thinking about the future, about how to feed his family months down the road. He planted those seeds in the only small patch of viable soil he could find. Steve studied the photo, visibly moved. "The resilience of children never fails to amaze me." "Exactly," Keanu agreed. "When I asked him why he started the garden, when everything around him was in chaos, he told me, 'Plants don't care that we are poor. They will grow if you take care of them.' That wisdom from a child who had lost almost everything, it stayed with me." Keanu gently took the photo back, looking at it with deep affection before continuing. "Our foundation doesn't just provide emergency relief. We stay and help communities rebuild in sustainable ways. With Miguel's village, we implemented a program that combined rebuilding homes with establishing community gardens and a small school." The audience was completely captivated now. Several were openly wiping away tears. "What happened to Miguel and his family?" Steve asked. Keanu's face brightened slightly. "His mother now runs the community garden program that feeds over 30 families. His oldest sister is in school studying agricultural science on a scholarship from our foundation. And Miguel..." Keanu's voice caught slightly. He touched the pendant again. "Miguel makes these pendants from local clay and sells them to tourists in the nearby market town. He's using the money to help other children in neighboring villages start their own gardens. He's 10 years old now and has helped create 15 community gardens that feed over 200 people. Steve shook his head, amazed. And he made that pendant for you? He did. When I visited 6 months ago to check on the community's progress, he gave it to me. He told me it represents hope growing from broken ground. Keanu looked directly at Steve, his eyes intense with emotion. He said, "When you wear this, remember that even movie stars need to stay connected to the earth." The studio erupted in a mixture of laughter and applause at the child's innocent wisdom. "Out of the mouths of babes," Steve remarked. "That child has more wisdom than most adults I know." "That's why I decided to wear it today," Keanu continued. "Usually I keep my foundation work private. We operate in 12 countries, focusing on children's education, sustainable agriculture, and clean water projects. We've helped rebuild after natural disasters in Guatemala, Philippines, Haiti, and Nepal. But we do it quietly because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because it's not about me. It's about Miguel and thousands of children like him who don't need a celebrity savior. They need resources, opportunities, and for someone to recognize their inherent dignity and capacity." Steve nodded thoughtfully. "You're not just giving handouts. You're investing in people's futures, in their own ability to rebuild." "Exactly," Keanu agreed. "When we first arrived in Miguel's village, many well-meaning aid organizations were dropping off food packages and leaving. Important work, definitely. But Miguel didn't want a package. He wanted his father's seeds to grow. He wanted to remain connected to his heritage, to the land, to his future." Keanu leaned forward, his voice gaining intensity, though still characteristically soft. "One day, I was helping build a roof on one of the new homes. Miguel came by with a handful of carrots he'd grown. Tiny things, barely bigger than my thumb. He insisted on giving them to me. I tried to refuse. This child needed those vegetables far more than I did. But he looked up at me with such determination and said, 'When you give and never receive, you steal from others the blessing of giving.'" A murmur rippled through the audience. Steve's hand moved to his heart, deeply touched. "A 7-year-old said that?" Steve asked incredulously. Keanu nodded. His grandmother had taught him that. It transformed how I approach philanthropy. We don't just give to these communities. We enter into relationship with them. We learn from them. Miguel has taught me more about resilience, dignity, and hope than I could ever teach him. Steve gestured to the photo that Keanu still held. "May I see that again?" Keanu handed it over. Steve studied it carefully, then showed it to the audience. "Look at those eyes. That's not a child looking for handouts. That's a child with purpose, with determination." "That's exactly it," Keanu said. "And there are millions of Miguels around the world. Children with incredible capacity and resilience who just need someone to see them, to invest in their vision rather than impose our own." Steve handed the photo back to Keanu, who carefully returned it to his pocket. "Why tell this story now?" Steve asked. "You've kept this foundation work private for 15 years. Keanu touched the pendant again, thoughtful. "I promised Miguel I would wear this pendant. When you invited me on your show, I realized I couldn't honor that promise without explaining what it means." He smiled slightly. "Also, Miguel watches videos online sometimes at the community center. He told me he's a big fan of yours, Steve." Steve's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Me? Really? Your humor, your journey from hardship to success, your faith, these resonate with people around the world, even in small villages in Guatemala," Keanu explained. "Miguel told me, that man knows what it means to climb a difficult mountain." Steve was visibly moved, blinking rapidly to control his emotion. "Man, that touches me, truly." "Miguel also made me promise something else," Keanu continued. "He asked me to tell other people with resources that children don't need saviors. They need partners. They need people who will see their capacity, not just their need." That's a powerful message, Steve acknowledged. So different from how we usually think about charity. Keanu nodded. Our foundation operates on that principle now. We don't sweep in with all the answers. We ask communities what they need, what vision they have for their own futures. Then we help them achieve it. Steve leaned back slightly, processing everything he'd heard. So you're telling me you've been running this international foundation for 15 years, working in 12 countries, and never once used it for publicity? Never issued a press release? Never had your name attached? That's correct, Keanu confirmed. It's not registered under my name. The staff who work there don't talk about my involvement. It's not a secret exactly, just private. Why? Steve asked simply. Because the moment my name is attached, it becomes about me rather than about Miguel and his community. Celebrity has a way of distorting things, making them about image rather than impact. The audience was completely silent, absorbing this perspective. But you're breaking that silence today, Steve pointed out. Keanu smiled gently. Only because Miguel asked me to. He said, if you truly believe in partnership, then sometimes you must let others help you too. He believes that sharing these stories might inspire others with resources to approach philanthropy differently. Steve nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his face. That Miguel sounds like he could run for president someday. I wouldn't be surprised, Keanu laughed softly. The children I've met through this work, they have such clarity, such wisdom. In Haiti, I met a 12-year-old girl named Esther, who organized a community waste collection system after the earthquake when no government services were functioning. In Nepal, 2 teenage sisters created a mobile school that traveled between remote villages. In the Philippines, a 9-year-old boy developed a simple water filtration system using local materials. These aren't just heartwarming stories, Steve realized. These are examples of what's possible when we see people's capacity rather than just their poverty. Exactly, Keanu affirmed. And that's Miguel's message. That's why I'm wearing his pendant and sharing this story today. Steve sat quietly for a moment, unusual for the typically energetic host. The studio remained silent, everyone sensing the weight of the moment. You know, Steve finally said, I've interviewed thousands of celebrities on this stage. I've heard about their charities, their causes, their foundations. But what you're describing is something entirely different. This isn't charity as a brand extension. This is... He searched for the right words. This is relationship. This is seeing people's humanity. Keanu nodded. Miguel wouldn't let me see him any other way. Steve looked out at the audience, then back at Keanu. I think we all came here today expecting a certain kind of interview. Some laughs, some stories about your movies, maybe a motorcycle tale or two. But what you've given us is something far more valuable. What's that? Keanu asked quietly. A different way of seeing, Steve replied. A reminder that behind every cause or charity or foundation, there are real human beings with dignity, capacity, and wisdom, even when they're 7 years old. The audience broke into spontaneous applause, many rising to their feet. When the applause finally quieted, Steve asked, what can people do if they're inspired by Miguel's story? Not everyone can start a global foundation. Miguel would say, start where you are, Keanu answered immediately. See the people around you, really see them. Not just their needs, but their capacities, their gifts. Maybe it's the homeless person you pass each day, or the elderly neighbor who lives alone, or the refugee family that just moved to your community. Approach them as potential partners in building something better, not just recipients of your charity. That's a profound shift in thinking, Steve acknowledged. It is, Keanu agreed, and it's challenging. It's easier to drop off a donation and feel good about ourselves than to enter into relationship with people whose experiences are different from our own. But Miguel would say the hard path is worth taking. Steve nodded thoughtfully, then looked directly at the camera. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, More with Keanu Reeves and the lessons he's learned from a remarkable young boy named Miguel. As the show went to commercial, the audience buzzed with conversation. In the control room, producers were already discussing how to adjust the remaining segment to continue this unexpected but powerful conversation. When the cameras began rolling again, Steve had a surprise of his own. Welcome back, everyone. We're here with Keanu Reeves, who's been sharing the remarkable story of Miguel, a young boy from Guatemala who's helping feed his community through sustainable gardening. Keanu, before the break, you mentioned that Miguel watches videos online sometimes and is apparently a fan of this show. Keanu nodded, curious about where Steve was going with this. Well, Steve continued with a growing smile, our production team works fast, and with the help of your foundation staff, who we contacted during the break, we have someone who would like to say hello. The large screen behind them flickered to life, revealing the smiling face of Miguel, now 10 years old, sitting in what appeared to be a simple community center. His eyes widened with excitement when he saw Keanu on the monitor in front of him. "Señor Keanu," he exclaimed, waving enthusiastically. "Estás usando mi collar." "You're wearing my necklace." Keanu's face transformed with genuine surprise and joy. He stood up immediately, moving closer to the screen. "Miguel, ¿cómo estás, amigo?" "How are you, friend?" Miguel beamed with pride. "Estoy bien, mira." "I'm good. Look." The camera pulled back to reveal a flourishing garden behind him, with several other children working among the rows of vegetables. "El jardín número 16, Miguel announced proudly. "Garden number 16. Keanu's eyes glistened with emotion. "Es hermoso, Miguel. Estoy muy orgulloso de ti." "It's beautiful, Miguel. I'm very proud of you." A woman stepped into frame beside Miguel, his mother, Maria. She spoke softly in Spanish, which was translated for the audience through subtitles. "We wanted to thank you for telling our story, Señor Reeves. Miguel has been so excited since your foundation told us you would wear his pendant on television." "It's my honor," Keanu replied, touching the pendant again. "Your son is changing the world, Maria." She smiled, her eyes reflecting both pride and the hardship she had endured. "He is his father's son." Miguel tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering something to her. She nodded, and he turned back to the camera with a serious expression. "Señor Steve," he said in careful English, "thank you for having Señor Keanu on your show. My grandmother watches you when she can. She says you make her laugh even when life is hard." Steve stepped forward to stand beside Keanu. "Miguel, your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. And what you're doing with those gardens, that's amazing, young man." Miguel grinned, then grew serious again. "I have a message for your people watching." "We're all listening," Steve encouraged. Miguel took a deep breath, speaking slowly in his practiced English. "When the mountain fell on our village, we lost many things. But we did not lose ourselves. Remember this when you want to help people. We are not just poor. We are strong. We are smart. We can build our future if we have friends who believe in us." The studio was absolutely silent as this young boy's wisdom resonated through the space. "Gracias, Miguel," Keanu said softly. "I'll visit again soon to see garden number 16. Miguel nodded enthusiastically. "We will save carrots for you." The audience laughed warmly at this, and Miguel waved goodbye as the connection ended. As the screen went dark, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Steve turned to Keanu, who was still looking at the screen where Miguel's face had been, his expression one of profound respect and affection. "That right there," Steve said, gesturing to where Miguel had been, "is what it's all about. Not statistics or photo ops or tax deductions. That young man has changed his community forever." "And me," Keanu added quietly. "He's changed me forever too." Steve nodded in understanding, then addressed the audience. "I think we've all been changed a little bit today. Sometimes we think we need complicated solutions to the world's biggest problems. But Miguel reminds us that sometimes it starts with something as simple as planting seeds in difficult soil and believing they can grow. Keanu nodded in agreement. Miguel would say that hope is the most important seed we can plant. And it seems to me, Steve concluded, that's exactly what you and your foundation have been doing for 15 years, planting seeds of hope by believing in people's capacity rather than just responding to their needs. It's a privilege, Keanu said simply. As the segment drew to a close, Steve asked one final question. For those watching who are moved by Miguel's story, is there a way they can support this work? The foundation remains private, Keanu explained, but Miguel's message isn't about supporting our specific projects. It's about approaching all our efforts to help others with a different mindset, seeing partnership rather than just need, capacity rather than just poverty, relationship rather than just charity. That's a message worth spreading, Steve acknowledged. And it came from a 7-year-old boy who refused to see himself as a victim, Keanu added. That's the real story worth telling. Steve turned to the camera for his closing remarks. We've had many celebrities sit in that chair over the years. We've heard about movies and music and fame. But today, we've been reminded of something far more significant. That true impact often happens quietly, without fanfare, in the most unexpected places, and through the most unexpected people. He gestured toward Keanu. Thank you for sharing Miguel with us today, and thank you for showing us what it looks like to use privilege and resources in service of human dignity rather than just human need. As the show's theme music began to play, signaling the end of the segment, Keanu touched the pendant one last time, a silent tribute to the boy who had taught him lessons no Hollywood success ever could. The cameras stopped rolling, but the conversation in the studio continued long after, with audience members and crew alike discussing what they'd witnessed. Not just a celebrity interview, but a profound reminder of our shared humanity and the unexpected teachers who appear in our lives, sometimes in the form of a 7-year-old boy planting seeds in broken ground. And somewhere in Guatemala, Miguel continued tending his garden, unaware that his wisdom and determination had just touched the hearts of millions, planting seeds of a different kind, seeds of a new understanding of what it truly means to help others rise. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear that true charity isn't about pity, but partnership. And let us know in the comments, when has someone you were trying to help ended up teaching you something invaluable instead? Your story might be the very thing someone else needs to hear today.